Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon Fitzpatrick, and I'm your co-host for today's webinar, 5 Presentation Bullets You Cannot Live Without, with graphics guru Mike Parkinson. I always enjoy Mike's presentations. I learn a lot, and I'm sure you will as well. Joining me as co-host is Dave Zielinski, editor of PresentationXpert. One of the things we're very proud of is our expert thinking program, which really gives you a robust way to have peer-to-peer conversations. It's a community where you can share ideas, get resources. We also post all of our webinars there, so look at the catalog and see if there's one maybe you would like to see again or one that you missed. And join our Twitter conversation, #PresentationXpert. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave Zielinski, the editor of PresentationXpert and an award-winning writer. His new book, Master Presenter, Lessons from the World's Top Experts on Becoming a More Influential Speaker, was just released late last year. You can order it on Amazon or through a link on our website. Dave, it's up to you.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. It promises to be a good and high-energy one. I'm pleased to introduce our presenter today, Mike Parkinson, the founder of Billion Dollar Graphics. Mike is a longtime valued contributor to our newsletter, an internationally recognized visual communications expert, professional trainer, and award-winning author. He has spearheaded multi-billion-dollar projects and created thousands of graphics, resulting in significant revenue increases for his clients. Mike also is a partner at 24 Hour Company, which specializes in proposals and presentations, and his Billion Dollar Graphics and Get My Graphics websites share best practices and many helpful tools. With that, Mike, I will let you take it away, and good luck.
Thank you very, very much, Dave. We are going to learn the five that I have found, silver bullets, that significantly increase the likelihood that we will have an amazing presentation. I've looked at, I've read many books, countless books on the topic. I've created over 1,000 presentations and delivered hundreds of presentations. And what I've learned is there seems to be 5 things that if people do, they will be far, far more successful. And it isn't just me talking. These are other people who are experts in the industry. So if we apply these silver bullets, we will be more successful. I'll teach you how to do it today. I'm going to show over 60 examples. I don't know about you, but when I see it in action, it cements it. I understand it. Rather than talking about the theory, we're going to be talking about tactical solutions, the way in which it has worked for other people. So what is the most important, the highest end silver bullet that we can put into any presentation? Well, what I have found is the most important thing, and it's not even, it's what this list allows us to do. The most important thing, the true goal of any presentation is to engage the audience. If we use the 5 silver bullets that I have in front of us, or that we'll learn today, we will absolutely engage the audience. So what's number 1? I took the sound effects out because I didn't want anything to get in the way. So, ding! So the very first thing that we want to keep in mind, one of the most important things we can do, is to engage, or I should say, is to make sure that our slides are audience focused, that they are benefit driven. What will you, the audience, get out of the content that I'm about ready to share with you? And that's the way in which I started this presentation. There's a gentleman by the name of Andy Bounds. If you don't know who he is, he's a presentations guru based in the United Kingdom. He is amazing. And one of the things he says is that he often gets called in, and people say, "Can you look at my slides and make it better? What can I do? I only have a day, a couple hours. What can I do to have the biggest impact?" And what he says is it's not the content, it's not the visuals, it's not an engaging start or a clear structure or even captivating headlines, humor, or interactivity. The number one thing you can do is to know what you want to have happen after they look at the presentation. After our audience experiences the presentation, clicks through the slides, watches the webinar, goes to the main event, what do we want to have happen? That should drive everything, and that's what makes a benefit-driven slide deck, presentation, webinar, etc. One of the tricks to do that is to bring the future into the present. What we talk about is what is going to happen if you do what we ask. So here we have our first example. The goal is that whatever solution we put in place stops fraud and theft before it happens. Apparently, the solution provider is Eagle One Solutions. How do they do that? And the slide is going to answer those questions. So apparently, the solution starts protection protocols immediately. It confirms identity and credentials. And it denies inconsistent reports. If we let it do those things, we will stop fraud and theft before it happens. So we started with the benefit. Why should the audience pay attention to the information we're about ready to share? We brought the future into the present. It stops fraud. It will stop fraud. It stops fraud right now. You engage this solution, it will stop fraud. I have a question for you. What do you want your presentations to result in? Your answers help me choose what examples I'm going to focus on.
Mike, I've launched the poll for everyone to do. We're interested in learning a little bit more about what's important to you guys. So if you answer the poll, we see we've got about 18% of you have voted. So let's give it another minute. Mike, I'm curious, out of all of them, what do you think is going to be the number one answer?
Oh, let's see. Improve understanding. I would say that almost every presentation at some level needs persuasion, even education, even sales, even marketing. We're trying to nudge the audience to a conclusion. Unless our only goal is to share information, then I would ignore persuasion.
I'm going to close the poll and share the results, and I think you'll be surprised what the answer is. It's improved recollection and understanding is our number one answer at 42%.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Everything that I'm sharing with you today will 100% improve understanding and recollection. As a matter of fact, during my co-located live seminars, I conduct tests. So I'll show a deck or do a presentation without the silver bullets and do one with, and then I'll ask people questions that prove that they understand it and that they recall the information, and according to my research, it's about 82% more. It increases understanding and recollection about 82% more. Some less. On average, that's what it is. That's what we're going to learn today. All of these other things we will absolutely be able to do. Just know that improved understanding and recollection is critical to make a sale, build awareness and trust, and motivate an audience. Here's another example. We have a typical slide. This is before, and this slide was meant to summarize the benefits to the audience. In this instance, the audience were hotels, and they were going to buy a solution from a solution provider, and they were trying to educate them, help them understand why the solution that they were presenting is a very good solution. So if we look at this, and if we were to disseminate this, we realized there are some benefits hidden in this sea of words. So what I found is if we put the benefits first, and if we were to read those bullets, what we'd find is all of the benefits either save money, make things easier, or make things faster. And our understanding of the audience is that's what they care about. So one of the features is that it's free to hotels. Well, that saves money. Another feature is that it's a user-friendly, intuitive interface. that means it's easier and faster. And then we would simply go through each of the elements within our content and then assign a benefit to each one of those so that each of those features has weight. The audience actually cares about the content. Because quite frankly, I don't know that I care about the fact that it's the very last one, RFP data archived and available. I don't know that I care about that. However, if the presenter reminds me, oh, and by the way, when the RFP data is archived and available, it makes it easier and faster for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about each one of those later on in our presentation. If the presenter said that, I'd start to care about each one of those features. Let's take a look at another. If you look at the title of this, the title gives us a reason to give a rat's patootie about the content. If the audience wants to save money and wants to be able to process more applications, then they're going to pay attention to what's inside of this presentation. Now, a little secret. All of the silver bullets that I'm sharing with you, I'm using throughout this presentation. I'm not necessarily using only one silver bullet at any point in time. They often work together. Let's go back to this slide. So now that I have the audience's attention by making sure that the title gives them a reason to care about the content, it's benefit-driven, it brings the future into the present, you save $1.2 million annually. How do we do that? Well, we do it through the PR lifecycle. What's the PR lifecycle? This is a dialogue that goes on in people's heads. Well, the PR lifecycle is step one. We assess origination and program, and we do the following steps in the process, then or elements in the process. Then step two, we review financials and do these really cool things. And step three, we have a legal review, etc. And then we execute, and execution looks like this. And then that leads to the benefits. So the benefits, having efficiency, which is 5 days, that means we can process more applications. Lower cost, $800 per application. If we multiply that times the number of applications, we get 1.2 million. And if we have a low risk of errors, that means we process more applications because there's nothing slowing it down. The content supports the message, and the message is benefit-driven. Here's another example that's not animated. We do not have to animate everything. I'm giving examples. So if we look at this particular slide, the title is benefit-driven, guaranteed quarterly software releases. You may not care, I may not care, but the target audience for this slide deck really cared. That's what they wanted most. And so this graphic explains how they will get their quarterly software releases. There's a process, and then we would take a deeper dive into this slide.
Just for a quick question,
Yeah.
A question I think you're going to love. Are these slides all created in PowerPoint? I haven't seen most of these graphics available as options.
Yes, these slides were created in PowerPoint, and everything that you see was created via three websites. Number one is getmygraphic.com. Number two is istockphoto.com. And number three is fotolia.com. Fotolia is spelled F-O-T-O-L-I-A. GetMyGraphic is for PowerPoint graphics. iStock Photo and Fotolia are for photographs and vector images. So everything that you're seeing, 90% of this, actually 95% is from GetMyGraphic, and the rest is from Fotolia and iStock Photo.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely, and they're all PowerPoint native. If I were to click off of this, you'll see that all of the elements are editable, so I can move things around. So back to the silver bullets. We've talked about making things audience focused. It's all about our audience. Number two, what is it? Tell a story. There's an old saying, facts tell and stories sell, and I'm going to show you examples of how to tell stories even with quantitative numbers, things that typically people think are very boring. No, 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 they're not. And if we tell a story, they're far likely to be remembered, understood, and impact us emotionally, and emotions are critical. because emotions impact the very mechanisms of rational thinking. There's a lot of research done on this topic. Dan Ariely wrote an amazing book called Predictably Irrational. Once again, Dan Ariely wrote a great book called Predictably Irrational. It will change your life. Essentially, it speaks to how we make decisions, how we learn, how we absorb things. How does that work? Heuristics. It's an old Native American proverb. No one seems to know where it came from. The point is, it's too true. It is so very true. The secret is, it'll live in my heart forever. People do not forget how they felt. So as soon as your name or your product or your solution, your idea, the thing you're trying to teach people, what you're trying to educate people on, as soon as that pops in their head, how did they feel when they learned about it? That will always be there, and it will be connected, bonded to what you were sharing with them. We want to make sure that the emotion is always connected to the content. So let's take a look at a very basic, excuse me, I got to move my microphone. Here we go. Let's take a look at a very basic slide. I took out as much of the content as possible to demonstrate the fact that we have a simple, clean slide that tells a story. There are very few words. As a matter of fact, I Greeked out, quote unquote, removed as many of the words as possible, and yet we're still getting a story. And the presenter can speak to that, be it in a webinar or otherwise. If this were a presentation that were simply click through, we could add the necessary words and have it come up at the right time. Let's take a look at another example. Let's say we want to talk about our new tool, our Exceed engine. So if we take your data tools and we take your search tools and we put it into our Exceed engine, what comes out are benefits, things that the customer cares about, and it's telling a story. 32% cost savings, 42.1 million international users, 91 awards, and 96 million in increased revenue. This is telling a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This helps people stay engaged. And I could use a visual metaphor to tell a story as well, much like we're doing here. Here's another example. Let's say we want to motivate an audience to switch from an old system to go to a new system. I'm about ready to do an educational seminar on the new system, and I want them to understand how we got there, or I want them to realize that migrating from the old to new doesn't have to be scary. How do we get from the old system to the new system without falling into a river of risk? Well, the first thing we do is we come up with a step-by-step process. We analyze and review the current needs of the system, we plan, we test, and then we deploy. Once we put those stepping stones in place, creating a bridge from one side to the other is very easy. I'm telling a story in order to help the audience understand that moving from the old system to the new system is not very risky, because I'm using all of the attributes associated with this bridge go into my story, and it allows them to remember the content via this vehicle. Here's another example. Let's say we want to explain to people how we went from where we were to where we are. So in 2007, we collected documents and reports. In 2008, we reviewed and we did a 3-level assessment. In 2009, we measured all the information via 99-point metric test. Then we compared all that information in 2010. In 2011, we allocated or we assigned solutions based on the findings. Then we launched the solutions globally, and we made an interactive report portal. After we've massaged that, we were able to create an online presence where all users can report results that automatically improve the system. That's how we got here. It told a story. It walked them through it, and it did it in a very cool way. I'm sure a lot of us have heard content is king. Well, actually, that's not true. Content is so critically important, but what is more valuable is contrast. If what we see and what we how we're engaged, if it's different than things we've seen before, we pay attention to it. So what I'm showing you are examples of slides that probably aren't like what you're used to seeing. Some are, some aren't. Those that are unique to you probably stand out more because you think, oh, that's cool, I'd like to do that in my presentation. Why is that? Because contrast is king. Things that stand out get more attention because things that stand out can typically hurt us. So our brain pays more attention to things that stand out from the rest. That's an adaptation that our brain has come to use to survive. Here's another example. Let's say we want to develop better software faster. How would we do that? Well, if I said you use a Scrum process, and you would say, holy free holies, what's a Scrum process? Oh my gosh. And I say, well, let me explain it to you. I'm going to tell you a story about the Scrum process allowing us to develop better solutions or software faster. First thing we do is we have the requirements, and those requirements come in from users and customers and executives and developers and testers. Then we create a product backlog from that. Essentially, it's a wish list of features that we want. And we select the features that we're going to do in this version of the software. All of this is overseen by the product owner. The next thing we do is we create a release backlog, and this prioritizes the estimated time for the selected features. So 16 hours for A, 32 hours for E, and 14 hours for C. The next thing that we do is we create what's called sprint backlogs. And those sprint backlogs allow us to do iterative versions of the software. We do 4 to 12 concurrent sprints, 3 to 30 days each. All of them have 10-minute stand-up meetings with the Scrum Master, which sounds like, yay, sounds like something from Lord of the Rings, and the subject matter experts. The subject matter experts are estimating time, they execute the sprints, and they test the software. All of this is overseen by the Scrum Master, who has what's called a burn-down chart. The burn-down chart makes sure that we're on track for hitting our goal of getting it done in the time period and the hours allotted. If that's the case, then the software is ready to ship. If not, then we readjust and make sure that we can hit that software development goal. That's the Scrum process. That is a very challenging process to understand. I have been in meetings where it took multiple 4-hour meetings, and still some of the people didn't understand what the Scrum process was. You may or may not have a good understanding of it. I suspect you have a better understanding than most people in the world right now because we told a little story. Here's another example. How did we guarantee best value? How did we decide which is the best value solution, information, path that we're going to take forward? Well, what we did is we analyzed 6 levels. And on the first 2 levels, we noticed that we couldn't hit the schedule. So if we couldn't hit the schedule on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables, then that means we can't use it because we must hit the schedule. On the remaining 3, 4, 5, 6 levels, we looked at the variables, and they were assigned quantitative amounts, of course. And we noticed that only one of those was much lower, had a 25% lower price, whereas the risk, the quality, and the performance and the schedule really didn't change. So that helped us choose our best value. I'm telling a story. I'm walking you through some pretty potentially dry information, but I'm telling it in a way that's clear and compelling because I'm using a story. We can use simple images to tell a story. Very clean, nice, powerful images tell a very simple story, and people will remember it. I was on SlideRocket.com one day, and they had before and after examples of what a major network, not a network, a movie studio was using within the walls to talk about their movies. And so this was the before, and it's a shame because it could be so much better. And someone did an after. And it's a simple image. I mean, it's a professionally taken image, but they just added an image, and instantly our brain automatically creates a story around this image. And that impacts us emotionally. We are reacting emotionally to this as well as cognitively. With that in mind, last question. Why are the reasons that we want to use, or what is the reason that we want to use stories? There's a capital I in impact. Hockey puck. Are the results coming in, Sharon?
They're coming in. It helps to unmute myself this early in the morning, but yes, they're coming in. We'll see shortly, but you can probably blame me for the eye. But definitely we've got kind of a little bit of a dark horse winner here. So I'm curious, let me ask you one more time. Who do you think the winner is going to be for this one?
Well, let's say, I hope it's all of the above, but I suspect it was increased emotional impact.
You are wrong again. I hate to tell you. It is
no worries, no worries.
84% all of the above. So that's the answer. It's back to you.
That's the answer we should have gotten. It is 100% true, all of the above. I was hoping people would vote on all of the above because it does. Stories increase emotional impact, are more memorable, and do stand out. They absolutely work every time. Almost every single presentation I start with, almost. It either starts with a benefit or it starts with one of the silver bullets. I either tell a story, I start with benefits, or I do one of the other silver bullets we're about ready to learn. Very, very wise decision. I'm not the only one coming up with this. This is from Powtoon.com. Powtoon looked at presentations by Steve Jobs, Amy Tan, Malcolm Gladwell, Susan Cain, Tony Robbins. These are giants in the world of presenting. And if we look at these, what do they all of them have in common? Storytelling. All of them tell stories. And all of them chucked the bullet points. The secret to all of this stuff is keep it simple. Tell a story with a simple message. Make it benefit-driven and make it clear and easy to understand what that benefit is. If the benefit is unclear, too complex, that's a problem. People do not think in bullet points. Something else to keep in mind, the confused mind. This is very important. The confused mind always says no. Keep it simple, silly. KISS. Keep it simple, silly. The confused mind always says no. Let's take a look at another website. I'm going to go to inc.com, that URL right now. Let's see what Mr. James thinks about what makes the best presentations. Let's go down his list. I noticed something. Appeal to motion. How do we appeal to motion? Stories. Oh, number 3 on his list, tell stories. Keep it simple. That is awesome. If we look at people who analyze successful presentations, we're going to find these silver bullets appear over and over and over again. Why? Because it's empirically true that they work. So let's take a look at number 3. Number 3, what is it? It's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance essentially means, as it applies to the presentation world, essentially means that I don't want the audience to know what I'm going to say before I say it. If they think they know what I'm going to say before I say it, they tune out. Our brains work much, much faster than people can talk and we can listen. Our intrinsic mind is processing millions of bits of information for every one conscious thought we have. To keep people engaged, we want to make sure that they don't know what we're going to say before we say it. Let's look at some examples. By the way, this is based on a true story, which is incredibly humbling. However, I've changed some of the facts so that we can do this webinar. 14 children were injured in car accidents in this one school zone. 14 children. We found that the average speed in the school zone was 48 miles per hour, which is way above what we wanted. So how did we fix it? So we did something so incredibly simple. After 2 years of trying to slow the average speed down, we did something so simple that we were able to get the average speed down to 28 miles per hour within 1 week after 2 years of trying it. How did we do that? My guess is your brain's saying, how did you do it? Well, I'm going to show you how we did it. One thing I want to share with you, this is an aside, is what I'm about ready to share with you is very disturbing, so I covered or I redacted the most disturbing piece of the image. So I'll give you a place you can look it up to see what they actually did. What we did was we placed on every car in the area a poster on the windshield of every car. If you look in the lower left, you'll see examples of those posters underneath of the windshield wiper blade of those cars. On that image, we had a graphic depiction, which was created by a special effects photographer, of what they would see if, heaven forbid, they struck a child. It was a very graphic image, and people were outraged that they would show something like this. However, the question becomes, does the means justify the ends? And that's open for debate. Bottom line is, it got them to do what they wanted to do, and that's the story I wanted to tell you. If you want to look up the image at the bottom of the page, this was according to my research done by a firm in Auckland, New Zealand, and this is the information. Here's another example. Perhaps you and I work for Odyssey Software Incorporated. And I'm not going to tell you what my motive is because I want to make sure that we have cognitive dissonance here. I walk into your office or we're together in a presentation room and I say, here's the deal, everybody. We have the GDS division within Odyssey Software Incorporated. The strengths are that we're medical marketing and research leaders, and our weakness is we're not so good at sales and staffing. If we look at the GDT division, we are strengths for medical supply and sales leader, and we have our weaknesses, marketing, research, and we're overstaffed. So if we put those two divisions together, we would have the DNA for a new, better division because they complement one another so well. So once again, I'm using cognitive dissonance. You don't know where I'm going with this, so you're more likely to pay attention if you're my target audience. If you're not so much. Remember, it's all about the audience. It's audience-focused, benefit-driven. How are we going to resolve these issues? In a previous slide, I'd say this is how we're going to resolve the issues. I also told a story, and I used cognitive dissonance. Here's an example for those dealing with quantitative information. Let's say I am giving a meeting to shareholders for my company, Open Solutions. And I walk out and I don't say a word. Not one word. And I put this up there and I say only a few words during my slide. Competitor 1, 32 million. Competitor 2, 43 million revenue in 2014. Us. Any questions? It's a very powerful way to present data, quantitative data. Another trick that I'm using that I'll talk about later is how I finished my slide. I said, any questions? Here's another example. How do you make your job easy? Well, let's say you work for a company, and that company sends a lot of requests to you. An overwhelming number. Every day, every hour, it doesn't matter. So we take those requests and we collect them from users, reviews, quality control evaluators. We use some way to filter out what's important. We ask ourselves, does it impact others? Will it impact other software, hardware, processes, things of that nature? Is it time sensitive? Is it connected to an event that's less than a month away? Is it connected to past due deliverables? Is it connected to customer requests? And then we ask, can you do it? Can I do it? Am I able to execute it? Is it within my skill set? Is it within the skill set of our team? Is it something I can look up very easily on the internet and find a solution for? If the answer is yes, then we do it and we put it in our to-do list. That makes work easier and it makes sure it's done faster. That's how I define making my job easy. If we look at this, we went from 27 requests to 4 requests through a simple answer and question process when the request comes in. That's cognitive dissonance. Now let's take a look at number 4. And what I'm going to do with number 4 is I'm going to include 1, 2, 3, and 4 in some of our examples. So I'm going to make it audience focused when applicable. I'm going to tell a story when I can, when it makes sense. I'm going to use cognitive dissonance. And number 4, the silver bullet, is to use graphics. Graphics are a very powerful way to communicate information. Research shows that if we have a good graphic, it is far more likely to be remembered and understood than text alone. Text is decoded linearly, and it must go through a short-term memory gatekeeper, whereas graphics go right to long-term memory and are not decoded linear. They are decoded, or I should say they are looked at all at once, and then we break it apart in our brain. That's what science says happens when we see a good graphic. When we see a bad graphic, we typically ignore it. As I said, all of the things that we've seen today, these are the 3 where I go to get my graphic elements. Use whatever tool works for you. We talked a lot about Get My Graphic. The thing that I want you to know is there's a graphic cheat sheet available. If you go to the URL in your upper left corner, this thing is amazing. It saves tons of time and money. Here's how it works. Every single graphic that you and I will ever make in our presentations will fit into one of the categories down the left side. At its core, we're either showing hierarchy, architecture or structure, process or flow, cause and effect, etc. Let's say we're communicating relationships. Here's how it works. You and I are working together, and you say, Mike, I need a graphic that shows relationships. And I say, what about a Venn diagram? And you say, been there, done that. And didn't you say contrast is king? Venn diagrams don't really stick out. And I say, okay, what about a puzzle graphic? And you say, well, once again, been there, done that. It doesn't really stick out. And I say, well, what about, by the way, the yellow column is for simple graphics or simple messages. The orange is for more complex messages. And the blue column is for quantitative data, amount, value, or time. So I say, what about a funnel graphic? And you say, that's better, but I feel like it's not relevant. It's not the best visual metaphor. And I say, what about a pipe graphic? And you say, what's a pipe graphic? And I say, well, if you go to this URL, you can look up thousands of examples of them so you can see them before you need them to make sure that they're right. When you go to that website, you can say, what about a spiral graphic? And look at them and say, that is exactly what I want. So now I'm not creating a Venn diagram, trashing it. A puzzle graphic, trashing it. A funnel graphic, trashing it. A pipe graphic, and trashing it. But rather, I start with the spiral graphic because it took me 2 to 3 minutes to figure out which is the best graphic type. That's the power of the graphic cheat sheet. Please download it. Please use it. It will change your life. It has changed so many others. Put it up as a poster. Do whatever you want. Print it out. Keep it on your iPad. Keep it on your laptop. So helpful. It helps us decide whether we want the one or the following 2 graphics. Notice these 2 graphics I'm about ready to share with you say exactly the same thing cognitively, but they tell a different story. So the request order and the damaged part arrives at our repair station. Part is repaired and shipped. Does the customer or client need the part? If yes, the refurbished part is sent to the client. If no, the refurbished part is sent to the warehouse for future parts needs. That is the exact same graphic cognitively as showing this. Number 1, the request order and damaged part arrives at a repair station, so it comes into our repair station. The part is repaired and shipped. Does the client need the part? If the client needs the part, then the refurbished part is delivered to the client within 24 hours. If the answer is no, the client does not need the part, it's sent to the warehouse, and the refurbished part sits there for future needs. Both of those graphics say exactly the same thing cognitively, but tells a slightly different story. Here's another example. This is the before without using graphics, without telling a story. Now we use the visual metaphor to tell a story. Much more powerful. Here's another before. This is a simple graphic created in PowerPoint. Now I downloaded something and applied the content in PowerPoint, and I'm able to unpack as needed the information for each one of those elements. And it tells a story. Oop. Looks like, let's see here, user error. There we go. Here's another before. A lot of text. Doesn't necessarily tell a story, but it can be easily modified to tell that story. Work-life benefits, as such, short-term counseling, as such, and a live 1-800 number. Notice the title, Improve Employee Performance. That better be a benefit to the customer, to the audience, to the people who I'm giving the presentation to, over a webinar or what have you. We bring these things together and it improves workplace health and morale, improves performance, and reduces sick days. That way we improve employee performance. It tells a story, it uses a graphic, and there's some cognitive dissonance there. We don't have to animate everything. We're using graphics graphic metaphors to communicate information so that it's more memorable. Imagine if we only did this with text. Using the rocket ships, using a metaphor of a turtle compared to a rocket helps us understand and remember the message, the key message we're trying to tell. It helps us understand very quickly if we want to get a grant named after us, we have to contribute at the bare minimum $2,001. Or perhaps we want to talk about the amplitude of revenue based on marketing efforts. It's a very clever way to do it. It's going to stand out. And it also uses a visual, a metaphor, a gauge graphic to help us remember and comprehend the fact that turning the knob up and down, increasing the marketing documents that we send out directly contributes to the revenue, so our research says. Here's an animated example. How do you get what you want out of college? Well, the number one thing we're finding is if you increase your participation, some of the benefits that come out of it are your scholarship continues, you have an increased GPA, learning is improved, and you increase the post-college starting salary. All good things as long as you increase your participation. We can easily use graphics like this to talk about, oops, I have a Twitter. We can easily use graphics to talk about the volumes of things or the variable or the amounts that we're doing in each one of these areas. We can animate them if we need to. It might not be needed. Here's another example, how to pinpoint a target. Well, there's three critical components in today's drill. You need a reference point, we need our position, and we need the satellite data. Once again, we're using a graphic to help tell a story. If we just did it with text, it would not be as powerful. What about the 4 solutions that allow us to do what we need to do? Here they are represented graphically, so we're more likely to remember them, whereas if I took the graphics away, it wouldn't be as powerful, and it wouldn't be as memorable. What about cloud computing? How does cloud computing work? Well, I could talk to the benefits to the right, I could explain that we have our desktops, our phones, our tablets, our laptops, and on those devices we have documents and files. Those files are stored in the cloud so that we can interact or use them over multiple devices because it's not device specific. I could tell whatever story I want to tell. I could explain it any way I want, but it's using a graphic to help understand what we're trying to tell. We could use a single image and speak to things that are even more complex. The bottom line is we're visually representing the information so that it's going to stand out and it's going to be more memorable. Notice too that when I have professional looking slides, it impacts the perceived professionalism of the speaker or the person presenting the information. What is our process for collecting census data? Well, there's a 4-step process, and we illustrate that. Let's say we want to talk to the different, now we've added new majors at our college. We have biometrics, data science, biomedical engineering, digital testing, cybersecurity, and quantum physics. What have we done to bolster those particular majors? Well, we added a computer lab in just after 2013. In 2013, we added Maya at the very end of 2013, and it's continued to grow. We have an intern program for biometrics that started at the end of 2012, and we started an advanced placement group at the beginning of 2014. The Navy and cybersecurity got involved with us in mid-2013, and then the Pentagon got involved in March of 2014. For data science, we added a data lab. Dr. Harris joined us, Dr. Bredler, and we also have an advanced placement group and an intern program. We added equipment for biomedical engineering, and I think you get the point. It allows us to tell a visual story using a visual metaphor to help the audience follow along, and it's going to stand out. Perhaps we have a constellation of features that we want to talk about, so we use something that looks like a constellation. When are we done? How do we know when we're done? Well, the first thing, we have a 4-phased approach. In phase 1, we will collect from zone 1, and it'll fill up our database or our knowledge management base or whatever we want to call it. And zone 2 will fill it up even further. We can talk to the data underneath of it. Zone 3 will fill it up further, and then we divide and catalog the information, which will complete the process at the end of 2016, and we'll continue on with other parts of the process. What about phased growth? How might we show that? Well, a great visual metaphor might be a plant growing. So we can talk about each one of these and illustrate it graphically so that the audience remembers it. We could use that same plant metaphor and start breaking the plant down so that we understand the components that go into ensuring agency growth. I'm sure you've heard of a iceberg metaphor where on this things aren't always what they seem. There's more than meets the eye, so we could talk about level 1 through 5 that we completed. We could speak to level 3. But really, most of the work occurred beneath the surface. Oop, user error again. Sorry, guys. So everything occurred beneath the surface. So now I can speak to what really went on, the big pieces that led to allowing us to do what we did. It's telling a story, it's using a graphic, it's making it benefit-driven if the audience thinks that how we did it is a benefit. If they didn't, then we're not making it benefit-driven. We're using cognitive dissonance as well. Here we have a simple information graphic. I would recommend that we animate this coming on and off if we can. If not, that's okay. What about a visual metaphor for conflict? How conflict occurs? We could use road graphics for just about every scenario. Let's take a look at this. showing things coming together. We have multiple inputs, 5 inputs coming together, and what is the output? What about diverging outputs? We have elements that come in and they go into their separate buckets or areas or zones or parking lots or what have you. What about making it fun? What if we have a process, a 23-step process? Oh, 23 steps to remember. Oh my gosh. What about if we use a visual metaphor, make it a game? So step 1, this is what we do. Step 2, step 3, step 4, I speak to each one of those individually. Or perhaps I want to use a visual metaphor to show that we drilled for the solution. So I could animate this. So I could show over time, each slide, I would show the drill getting further and further down and what we found to be the case at each milestone until we get down to the actual solution, if we choose to do it that way. We could use a zipper metaphor. We could use perhaps showing a visual representation of cost being crushed. How did we do it? Well, we did it through these 5 steps, 6 steps. How do we save our business? Well, one disaster can end a small business, and we tell a little story. We talk about the things that could cause a business to be damaged or hurt. We talk about how the ramifications of hurting our business. So we're telling a story. We're using visuals. Perhaps we use a visual metaphor of a scale to show comparison. Or perhaps we want to talk about the list of features within our toolbox. So what we can do is we can create a graphic representation of that to help people remember and understand and organize the information, which is so very, very important, organizing the information. We might want to use a bullhorn metaphor, or use gauges to show levels of completion, or use different organization charts to show information, like an organization structure, something that's more unique, or once again the funneling process, or perhaps a map to show locations, or spiral development, or repeatable process, things synthesizing and going into something else. What about text-heavy slides? We can still create a visual representation of where that information came from, or show callouts or use tear sheets. All of this is going to stand out, and it's a visual representation of information. Even if you have way too much information on your slide, you can still do it in a way that helps people understand and remember it. Different ways to show information using visuals and the 4 silver bullets that you've used so far. So let's jump over. We're gonna do a quick tally. We're gonna look at number 5. Number 5 is involving the audience. That is a very, very, very powerful way to do things. So let's recap. We have number 1, which is audience focused, and don't go away, I still have more for you. Audience focused, benefit driven. Number 2, tell a story. Number 3, cognitive dissonance. Number 4, use graphics. And number 5, involve the audience. They all work together. All of these work together. So let's take a quick look at, I did a search, I just typed in best presentations. And these are the things that came up. Inc., which is something we just saw, and number 2 were the 25 presentations. So let's look at the 25 presentations. Let's go down to number 3. Let's see number 3 and see if we can spot some things that we've learned about. So these were considered the 25 best. Fix your really bad PowerPoint. That is benefit driven. Do we have visuals? Yes. Is the message simple? Yes, absolutely. So Seth Godin shared some things. He used visual representations, the old way, the new way. Nothing's changed, though, for PowerPoint if we look at 1988 compared to 2014. He's using visuals, and he's telling a simple story. Let's look at number 11, I believe it is. Let's take a look at number 11. And if we look at number 11, what would Steve do? 10 lessons from the world's most captivating presenters. Let's take a look. His awe-inspiring moments. This is what these people achieved. $75 million for charity, standing ovations. And this, once again, they're using imagery. And they're using simple messages. And they're making things benefit-driven. Let's skip that. Once again, the silver bullets are appearing in what we're seeing. And if we look at slide 12, let's see, number 12. Boy, I've got to tell you, how I got 2.5 million views on SlideShare, that's something, if you're on SlideShare and you want to get 2.5 million, I'd pay attention to that. That's a very benefit-driven, audience-focused thing to start the presentation with. Brilliant idea. So the silver bullets, they work together. One of the things I did, now a webinar is a challenging thing to get audience participation in. I tried to involve as much as we could. So let's move on to Q&A so that we can involve the audience as much as possible. Please, please, please ask me questions.
Mike, thank you so much. We've got a lot of people who are really enjoying this and some interesting questions. One of the questions, or actually a comment, I think, for the audience, so we can please use chatter to tell us what you think. Does anyone else feel less creative when creating the presentations or using graphics? You just don't often know where to begin. And what she says is, I mean, these are all great examples, but I just don't know where to start at certain times. Any thoughts? Any advice?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I do to get unstuck is I'll go to Bing or Google, type in the message I'm trying to send, and see what pops up under the Images tab. That's one of the ways. I'll go to a website like iStockPhoto or Get My Graphic and take a look, type in the message I'm trying to send. For example, let's say I'm trying to communicate a relationship or comparison. I type in the word comparison and see what pops up visually, and that is the visual that I can use in my slide deck. Hopefully that was helpful.
I think it is helpful, and it's also interesting to note, I just got Microsoft PowerPoint 2013 about 2 weeks ago, and what you're mentioning is something you can search online right from the pictures portion up at the top. It says search for online pictures, and I think that's a great addition to PowerPoint. It's been really helpful to me, I know. So one of the things that people are really asking about is bullet points. How do you choose what are the silver bullets?
Bullet points versus silver bullets. Forgive me. What I think that the question is about is when and where, what bullets should I use and what should I include?
Yes.
My answer is the bullets. This is my opinion and what works for me and my clients is no bullets on slides. The bullets should be in the speaking points. The rest should be represented as much as possible visually with as few words as possible to accompany the graphic. I am not a believer that only graphics are good. What I mean is that graphics and text together have a synergy that neither has by itself. And so what I choose is, let's say I have a bullet that reads, to submit your question or comment, use a question tab on your dashboard. So what you could do is have the dashboard, the question tab pop up, and just name it and then say those words. That's a way. So basically what we're doing is getting rid of any extraneous information that isn't germane to the key point of that particular bullet item. Hopefully that was helpful.
I think so. We have a question from Joan. Do you ever have to convince clients that their text-laden slides aren't effective? If so, how do you do it diplomatically? She deals with it a lot because of pride of authorship.
Yes, there's two ways I deal with it. One is that I say, people said so besides me, so I break out some amazing books like Dan Ariely's book, Tipping Point, or Blink, or things like that. But usually what I do is I involve, as much as possible, I involve the author in the creative process. So I tell them that let's take a look at what you're trying to say, and I have a process that I follow. So I ask them, in a nutshell, in one sentence, what is this slide communicating? And then what I'll do is I'll say okay, so you're communicating at its core the benefits of such and such. Let's take a look. Let's go to a website like Get My Graphic or whatever the site is, and let's look up some images that we can use to accompany this, and then they get excited about it. So I involve them as much as possible so that the pride of ownership is for both of us, and so whatever decision is made, they feel that it was theirs to make.
We have one last question, and then we're running short on time. So from Claire, she says, a lot of my presentations are based on presenting financials, and they appear very dry in content. Do you have any suggestions of how to present figures, tables, etc. in a more interesting way?
Absolutely. A few of the examples that I shared during the presentation where we had a simple quantitative chart, that's the secret, is to take the core message that quantitative data is supposed to be sharing, and then only share those relevant pieces of information and then represent them graphically. So rather in a table form or a matrix form, perhaps we want to convert that to an area chart or bar chart, and then don't bring up the information all at once. Bring it up in bite-sized chunks so that the audience can digest it, and then don't give them all of the information so that there's some cognitive dissonance. They don't know where you're going with this.
I think that's perfect. At this time, I would like to thank everybody for coming. We just want to remind everybody that you can go to our YouTube channel and look at any of our webinars, or you can go to our PresentationXpert.com/webinars, and there's a full catalog of both future and past webinars. As many of you know, I put actually one of Mike's past webinars because of some of the questions we were getting. And we hope you'll join us next month, which will be a makeover presentation with Rick Altman. So we're going to be also letting him do our own housekeeping slides, so that should be fun. At this time, I'd like to end the webinar and hope everybody has a wonderful day.